Hello and welcome back to Spherical Chicken in a Vacuum. Today I really wanted to start a series about material science with basic concepts that everyone can understand, but instead something happened. Something happened that changed my schedule, something happened, and I won't really want to discuss about this with you today. So the news is this one. Journal, a quite famous journal, eLife, lost his impact factor, will lose its impact factor over its controversial publishing model. For those of you that are not familiar with the eLife, eLife is a journal that basically publishes all the manuscripts that are submitted along with the peer review results and some comments from the editors. And before discussing the news itself, the piece of news itself, I want to discuss about the peer review and how it's done. So usually us, the scientists, produce some manuscript, but then we send this manuscript to a journal. The journal picks an editor in their editorial team, and the editor is in charge of this paper. The editor reads the paper, and he can decide immediately to reject it because it's not in line with the journal aim and scope, or because there are major mistakes, or because the quality of the English is just too low. This happens a lot. If the manuscript is not rejected immediately, it goes to peer review. So it goes to a team. Actually, it's not a team; it's a group of scientists that read the paper and evaluate the content and judge the quality, judge the contents, comment on what is missing, or what can be improved, and they can, of course, suggest. So they cannot reject directly, but they can ask for the paper to be rejected by the editor, which is the only one that has the power to do that. Or they can suggest to accept it as it is, which is basically never happens. Or they can send back some comments to the original authors, and then the authors can reply, and then the reviewers can reply again, etc., etc., etc. In this cycle, they can go over and over and over many times. I saw this happen up to 10, maybe 12 times in some cases. Well, most commonly it's just one or a couple of rounds of reviews. And the number of reviewers also changes. Sometimes you have comments from just one guy, sometimes like 7 8 people, all of them with comments that you need to address. And addressing the comments is important because depending on how you address the comments, how you improve the manuscript, they can be accepted or rejected. This is the standard model. But recently things have changed a little bit. So these guys in the bottom lost a lot of their power because not many people actually go to peer review. What happens is the guys in the top, the editors, acquire a lot of power because many journals immediately reject a lot of papers. Recently can be up to 80%, even more. And they usually comment something like, oh, it's not you, it's me. No, basically they say that the journal receives so many submissions that they cannot publish all of them, and they need to do a screening, and the paper did not pass the screening because reasons. Usually they don't even tell you what the reasons are. And this is the standard model, as I said. And another thing that's happening a lot is that the number of the editors inside of the journal is increasing a lot. We have editors, assistant editors, other members of the editorial team, editors for specific topics, etc., etc. So we are taking away a lot of work from the reviewers themselves, and a lot of work is done by editors nowadays. And editors are scientists, but they can also be from outside of the academics. And basically, for scientists, it's a good point in the CV to be an editor of journals, so they accept this position, even if most of the time, especially in the lowest levels of this pyramid of editorial team, you don't receive any money, any compensation for the hours and hours that you spend as an editor, as you don't receive money for the hours and hours that you spend as a reviewer. But editor is sort of more like profession, even it's most of the time is a part-time job or part-time activity. Well, they're not the same. Scientists are should participate in the peer review, but the editor, the position as an editor is a plus, and it's considered to be a good point in the CV, and that's why journals are using this to hire, whereas hire is not the correct term, get to increase the number of editors and get more work done for free. Well, but let's 1 second only. Let's discuss about the impact factor. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the concept itself. Now, impact factor is only one of the metrics that can be used to evaluate the journal, but ideally, the higher the number, the more reliable the journal is, which is a dangerous position because the content of a paper should be judged by its own value, not by the value of the journal it has been published on. And to use a ranking system for for saying if a journal is good or bad, if it's better than another, it's a very dangerous position. And this is based on a database, which is the database of Web of Science that contains a lot of papers, and the impact factor is calculated with a very simple formula. The impact factor of 1 year is the number of citations received on that year divided by the number of publications in the 2 previous years. So, for example, if my journal received 1,000 citations in 2024 and published 10 papers in 2023 and 10 papers in 2022, we have 1,000 divided by 20, which makes 50. So the impact factor is 50, which is crazily high. The average value of impact factor is probably around 3, maybe lower, and we have journals that are close to 100 or maybe even over 100 now. Very good journals are usually from like impact factor 8 up, but it really depends a lot on the topic. I'm in material science, and for me to publish at around 5, 6, it's a good result. 10 is a very good result. More than 10 is an exceptional result. In medicine, numbers are a little bit higher sometimes. Well, it depends a lot. And also, there is a lot of journals that don't receive an impact factor because they are not inside the Web of Science, and they're not inside the Web of Science because they are not considered to be reliable. So a lot of journals that are predatory and things like that. And there are, of course, 2 ways to increase the impact factor of a journal if you want to manipulate the data. And one is to increase the number of citations, and this is something that is happening more and more as journals are on social networks. They share their research, hoping to lure researchers to cite their work, or that you can decrease the number of publications. So this is exactly what the editors do before sending the paper out for review. So they reject immediately the paper because they only want to keep the publications that will keep the level of the impact factor of the journal at the same number or increase it. You don't want to publish papers that you know will not receive citations. And this is a problem because this is a form of gatekeeping. You are keeping science that you don't, not that it's bad science, it's just science that is not good from a commercial point of view out of journals. And this is also because we are using impact factor as an evaluation method. And if you know the Goodhart's law, when a measure becomes a target, so the impact factor was started as a measure and now it's becoming a target, and you want to increase it as much as possible, it ceases to be a good measure. And this is what's happening with the impact factor. Journals are trying to manipulate, to control it, because it gives more prestige to the journal, it gives them more citations, it gives more money. In the end, it's about money, right? In most cases, there are also publishers that are 100% academics, people that do these things completely for free. But here we are speaking about the large publishers that make a profit out of publishing. Okay? And the other problem is that us as scientists are evaluated depend on what we produce and on where this goes. If you publish on Nature, it doesn't really matter what you publish. A lot of universities will show interest in your CV, and you might receive more than average offers to join institutions. This is true, and is a commercial, purely commercial thing. It has nothing to do with the quality of the research itself. It's the name of the journal, and it's the impact factor that the journal has that can influence the result. They can influence the life. They can change the life of a scientist, and it doesn't really matter if the scientist is good or bad. So, for example, you might want to switch to topics that are hot now so that you can publish on journals with higher impact factor. And if you publish in journals that have higher impact factor, you will gain visibility. You can have more chances to get fundings and many other small and large advantages. Okay, but eLife had an impact factor, well, still has at the time an impact factor that is not bad at all. 6.4 is a above average impact factor. So it was not even a bad journal by itself. And even usually when we think about journals that are low quality, the impact factor is low, right? And that's what I discussed up until now. But eLife, even with the new editorial system, let's say, it doesn't seem to have lost completely its prestige so far. So far. And let's have a look at the model of eLife. In the case of eLife, you don't really rely on the reviewers to decide if a paper is good or not, because all papers will end up published. They will end up published with some sort of scoring. That's not really a scoring, but an evaluation from both the editorial, the editor that took care of the publication, and the reviewers. And the reviewers will be published with the paper. So everyone can read the paper, which is accessible for free because this is an open access journal, with the comments, so they can judge, they can see how other people judge the science without gatekeeping, without keeping the paper manuscript from being published. And of course, this has two sides, because in eLife, you need to pay every time you submit a paper, but you're sure that it will be published. So this can be something that is makes profit. And this is something on the other side that can increase the transparency and the accessibility of science. So there are two sides of this story. One more bad, one better, and one worse for research, let's say, okay? And because there are two sides of the story, there are two sides of the scientific community. We have on one side the reformist guy that think that the published system is failing because, as I told you, for example, there's control on what can be published. There is a lot of pressure from the publisher to make an income, to increase the income. There's a lot of pressure to publish a lot. So the publishing system is not working well anymore because the values have changed. There is a lot of private interest in scientific publishing now. So for the reformist, it's better to have everything available and to teach the people how to read a scientific paper. Give them comments, give them ideas, give them honest evaluations so they can read the science and read what scientists think about the science. It's transparency and trust on people. On the other side, we have the conservatives, and the conservatives are worried that if you crack the dam of peer review, then science will flood everything. And there will be a lot of bad science and a little bit of good science, and for people will be difficult to discriminate, to notice, to see what is good and what is bad, what is valuable and what is garbage. So the worries of the conservatives are related to the fact that people will not be able to discriminate. Of course, there is also the scoring and the fact that us as scientists, we like to see our numbers increase and we like to have our impact factors, the impact factors where we publish high, etc., etc. So There are other things to consider, but these are the two main positions. On one side, the publishing system cannot keep up with the amount of science, cannot the peer review cannot keep up. The quality of the peer review is not always good enough. There are interests in the middle. It's better to make the science, all science available, and let people decide what they want to trust or not. Also, because you have no control of that. People will always believe what they want to believe in the end. On the other side, there's the conservative position that is better to try to keep everything protected, closed, to filter so that the people can receive something that is already being cleaned enough and can be considered as good science. This approach has a lot of weak points nowadays because the volumes are just too big, the time is not enough, the number of papers is too big. So it's very difficult to keep the conservative position. So this is everything for today. It was about eLife and their publishing modeling and how they will be removed from the impact factor system, which of course has very dire consequences for people publishing on eLife, because if the impact factor of your journals is important for your CV, for your future, then to see the one journal disappear from the list makes things a little bit more difficult for you. So it has an impact on scientists, but it also shows how science is more or less now in the hands of some private corporations. It's a who makes Web of Science, who decides that a journal is good or bad, who decides if the journal is worth having an impact factor or not, is in the end is a private corporation, even if it's a society that has a lot of participants from different fields, etc., etc. It doesn't really matter. But this is a little bit worrisome, because if you think that someone can suddenly decide to change the rules of the game while you are playing. So, as always, there are many sides of the story, but in the end, it's about which of the two views you think is closer to your opinion on these things. And this is everything for today, and see you next time, hopefully to speak about material science. Bye.